Hi, my name is Cassidy Gary, and this presentation is going to inform you about Elbridge Gerry, who is probably a man you have never heard about, but he was also responsible for helping shape the United States to what it is today. Elbridge Gerry was born on the 17th of July in 1774 in Marblehead, Massachusetts. He came from a merchant family. His father was a merchant who worked on exporting ships and also took part in the local military, and his mother came from a very wealthy merchant family. In total, his parents had 11 children, but only 5 survived to young adulthood. Shortly before he turned 14 years old, he attended Harvard College and graduated with his bachelor's in arts at the age of 18. What were you doing at the age of 14 years old? He continued his college career and finished with his master's in arts by the age of 22. After he had finished college, he had joined his father's business, and the Gerry family became very wealthy because they had trading ties with Spain and the West Indies. During his early political career, he worked alongside Samuel Adams to help advocate for the colonial policies. These policies consisted of enslavement and exploitation through the military and political people and countries. He and the other Marbleheaders, who are townspeople of Marblehead, had helped create a hospital for giving out smallpox vaccines on an island off the coast of Massachusetts called Cat Island. It was burned down a year later by an angry group of townspeople who were very paranoid about the disease and the vaccine. The picture that is shown is the people who have smallpox in the beds after the vaccination, and the other men are delegates who are being shown around the hospital. He had gotten back into politics after the Boston Poor Act, which was an act that punished Boston for the Boston Tea Party, which was established by the King of Britain. Elbridge and his colleagues had opened the Marblehead port so they could still receive supplies. He was voted into the First Continental Congress, but turned the position down because of the recent passing of his father. Elbridge Gerry had many contributions to the United States that consisted of signing the Declaration of Independence, becoming the 5th Vice President of the United States, being a part of the Second Continental Congress, attending the Constitutional Convention, refusing to sign the Constitution, and the creation of gerrymandering. Some other contributions that are not going to be discussed is his involvement with the XYZ affair, his support for Alexander Hamilton during the Revolutionary War, and serving as presidential elector for John Adams. David Armitage states that the Declaration of Independence is among the most heavily interpreted and fiercely discussed documents in modern history. This document helped shape the United States to this day. It is separated into 5 different sections, which consist of natural evolution, right of revolution, the 27 grievances to the king, attempts of reconciliation, and lastly, a call for a change in government. As seen in the photo, the arrow is pointing to Elbridge Gerry's signature, which is very small. Elbridge Gerry served as vice president under President James Madison. He was sworn into office on March 4 of 1813 at the age of 68 years old. To this day, he was the oldest vice president to be elected into office. He was taking his oath of office while at his home. Gerry started to find it hard to keep up at his job because both him and Madison were falling ill at the time. Once Madison was healthier, Gerry was able to return home and fulfill his duties there. As vice president, his job included pushing the administration's agenda and supporting James Madison throughout his presidency. He was only able to serve 1 year in office before he fell ill and passed away in 1814 due to a hemorrhage in his lungs. Elbridge was considered a Democratic Republican who refused to sign the Constitution. He refused to sign it because it did not include a Bill of Rights, and in his opinion, it would put the colonists in danger because it gave the federal government too much power. He predicted that it will lay the foundation of a government of force and fraud, that the people will bleed with taxes at every pore, and that the existence of their liberties will soon be terminated, according to a JSTOR source. Although he did support the idea of adding amendments to the Constitution, because he thought that it could put the government in less power while keeping the colonists' liberties and freedoms safe. He was one of the 3 delegates from Massachusetts to attend the Constitutional Convention. He had stayed until the end of the convention, but ultimately ended up refusing to sign the Constitution as stated previously. There were 3 representatives from each state that came, which added up to be 55 delegates in total. But at the end of the convention, only 39 delegates signed and approved of the new Constitution. He supported the idea of the Connecticut Compromise. This was the idea of an agreement that the House and the Senate would be equally represented among the states. He was also a part of indirect elections. This is a type of election where voters do not choose between candidates for office, but instead elect people who then choose according to the dictionary, which is similar to what we have today, which is called an electoral college. The definition of gerrymandering is an unfair political advantage for a particular party by manipulating district boundaries. To help the Democratic-Republican Party, Elbridge Gerry signed a bill in 1812 that allowed redrawing of the districts in a salamander-type shape. There are 2 different ways that gerrymandering can be used. In the diagram shown, the top left picture is an example of cracking. This is where the majority party splits the opposing party's voters into different district areas, whereas the top right diagram shows packing. This involves packing as many voters as possible of the opposing party into one district to obtain a larger majority. The other picture shown is a picture of the districts in Massachusetts after being redrawn. Elbridge had redrawn the districts to help him gain more votes. The salamander that is on the left side of the picture is supposed to represent him. The way that it got its name was because of the salamander drawn in his last name, so they put it together and called it gerrymandering. In today's society, we redraw the districts every 10 years after the census takes place. Both parties have been accused of this over the years, but ended up getting caught. So this is where it gets interesting. Our ancestry, family tree, and how I'm related to Elbridge Gerry. There are 9 generations between my father, John Gerry, and Elbridge Gerry. The pictures go in order of the arrows that have been placed on the slide. The 3 charts show my family tree from me and all the way back to Bacchus Gerry, who had a brother named Seth Gerry, who was also a judge at the time. Seth had a son and a daughter, Emmeline Martha Gerry and Elbridge Joseph Gerry, whose obituaries show their relationship to Vice President Elbridge Gerry. I, Cassidy Gerry, am the daughter of John Gerry, who is the son of Neil Gerry, who is the son of Ogilvy Alton Gerry Sr., who was the son of Edwin Alton Gerry, who was the son of Ulysses Ogilvy Gerry, and then who was the son of Ulysses French Gerry, who was the son of Bacchus Pierce Gerry, who once again had a brother named Seth Gerry. Seth and Bacchus Gerry were children of Seth and Zilphia Gerry, whose brother was Vice President Albert Thomas Gerry. Here is just another view of the family tree that my grandpa had put together back 10 years ago. The pictures shown are the relationship between Seth Gerry and Bacchus Gerry, proving that they are brothers. Their father was also named Seth Gerry, and their mother's name is Zilphia Gerry. Their father was Elbridge Thomas Gerry's youngest brother. This is documentation of Seth Gerry's 2 children, Emmeline Gerry and Elbridge Joseph Gerry, who are cousins to Elbridge Thomas Gerry, and their mother's name is Mary Stenson Gerry. Some actual documentation we did end up finding was 2 obituaries from Emmeline and Elbridge Joseph Gerry. These 2 obituaries are from the newspapers back in the mid-1800s. Emmeline died from disease at the age of 38, and Elbridge died at the age of 68 because of natural causes. As you can see, throughout our generations, the name Elbridge and Seth were very popular among our ancestors. The arrow on the picture is pointing to the relationship between Elbridge Joseph Gerry and Vice President Elbridge Thomas Gerry. Elbridge Gerry was a powerful and smart man who made many contributions to the United States that went unrecognized. He helped form America to what it is today, and I am very proud to be a part of his family. Doing this research on him and our ancestry was very exhilarating and interesting because I did not know much about him. I only knew that he was vice president and signed the Declaration of Independence. But in reality, he did much, much more. Although he was not a key founding father of this country, he was still considered a founding father due to his signature being on the Declaration of Independence. We have yet to find more documentation about Elbridge Gerry, but my grandpa and I are now going to dig back even further and use more resources to find out more about him and our ancestry to him and his previous family members as well. This project gave me the opportunity to learn more about my relationship to him and also dig deep into our ancestry to find out more about where my ancestors came from and the experience to research this with my grandfather. The picture shown on the slide is a letter written by John Adams to Elbridge Gerry that recently went for $15,000 in an auction. As listed on this slide, these are the documents I used to gather my information and also cited throughout my presentation as well. This works cited page are for all the pictures used throughout my presentation.